Welcome. In this class we will talk about the concept of environmental impact assessment. Now when I say environment impact assessment, let's start this with understanding with an example. Let's say you have to build a dam at a specific location. Now before you build a dam, you'll have to consider certain parameters. For example, the people living in the vicinity of the region, the chances of seismic activities that could be witnessed in that area, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the kind of impacts that can be environmental, that can be social, and can be economic in nature. So environmental impact assessment tries to identify the various environmental, social and economic impacts before making a decision whether we should build a dam at a specific location or not. So in simple terms, I can say EIA takes place before the establishment or before the thing is started, and that is the key. So most of the students are struck up here, and this is as per the definition of United Nations for Environmental Protection. Now in India this concept started in 78-79, which was much later than the globally accepted phenomena where it started in 1960s. And the first countries to adopt it were Canada, Australia and New Zealand. So Canada, Australia and New Zealand started with this concept, which was released under 1969 as the National Environmental Impact Assessment, the National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA, and this was adopted by these three countries in 1973-74, and these were the pioneers to start with the concept of environmental impact assessment. Prior to this, there was no formal idea to start with a kind of impact assessment prior to establishment of any new feature or any new industry. It was simply the industries were established. Considering the changes in the environmental conditions, the climatic change taking place, this concept came into relevance more and more. And then you had India, which started it in 1978-79 with the River Valley projects. And under the 1986 Environmental Protection Act, environmental impact assessment became compulsory or mandatory in India for the 29 categories of developmental activities, and these activities mainly involved an investment of rupees 50 crores or more. So it was the basic area where environmental impact assessment kind of became mandatory in India. Now after the 1986, it was that some of the changes were brought in 1994, and nearly 12 new notifications were released and amendments were made to the existing environmental impact assessment criteria that were laid down in 1986. And finally in 2006, there was again changes that were brought about to the EIA concept, and these made it mandatory for mining, thermal, river valleys, infrastructure and industries which mainly were related to electroplating and foundries to have a mandatory EIA before the establishment. So in India, the last rule that was amended was 2006. So this is how the development took place in the concept of EIA. Now what is basically the idea when we talk about the concept of EIA? As I said, it is a kind of more systematic process which talks about future consequences. So considering the future consequences prior to the establishment or prior to the decision making, what is considered is basically taking into cause the accountability, the creditability, the cost effectiveness of the project, how flexible the project is, whether it is practically suitable for the region or not, what is the level of participation, the transparency and the certainty of the project. So these are some of the basic elements around which EIA rotates. Now what are the stages which are involved in planning or final formulation of an EIA? I can say first of all there is a screening. you select 4 or 5 basic locations and screen out which area is important. Then you try to lay down the scope of EIA, or in what areas it should be applicable, and those areas will differ based on whether it is a project related to mining, whether it is a project related to river valley, and so on. Now you have assessment and evaluation. This can be done on 3 parameters. First is matrix based method, you have the checklist method, and the network analysis method. So these are the 3 methods which are commonly used to assess and evaluate the various stages of EIA. Then finally you form a report. This report is a kind of non-technical summary which can be given to the general public and asked for feedbacks or suggestions. Finally you review the EIS, the submission document. Then there is a decision whether to approve this project or not to approve this project. Finally you monitor it, you see whether it fits the compliance and enforce it, and once enforced you have a kind of environmental audit that is done on a regular basis to understand the impacts of EIA. Now what are the projects that fall under the category of EIA? There can be various projects. First of all, it can be a project which can significantly alter the landscape. For example, as I said, construction of dam, a river valley project. Those significantly alter the landscape and the relief of the region. So all those projects would definitely fall under the assessment for EIA. Now the projects that require upstream developmental activity like mining activities, which requires cutting down of the forest. Then there can be activities which require downstream industrial process or industrial production, manufacturing of hazardous material or handling or use of hazardous material. The sites which are located near to the ecological sensitive areas, for example, the sites located close to Ramsar wetland areas, the sites located close to the mangrove areas, hilly areas, hill stations, religious important places, and so on and so forth. And finally, industrial estates which could cause a cumulative effect, with what we discussed under the cumulative causation theory. There is a kind of cumulative effect. So one industry is established, and surrounding that you have numerous other industries that come up. As a result, the damage caused by one industry and the agglomeration of say 20 industries would be I would say more than 20 times higher as compared to that single industry. So kind of collaboration or clustering of industrial complexes would also lead to projects, would also lead to assessment under EIA. Now what do we address primarily when we talk about the environmental assessment? We assess the water quality, we assess the soil quality, we assess the air quality. Again, these are the basic, I could say, the biotic, components of atmosphere, the biotic and the abiotic components that we are talking about. So we are focusing on the abiotic components right now. However, it's important to understand the workers' safety. So environmental, occupational safety, occupational hazards must be discussed under the EIA. So if there is a mining activity, all the miners, the workers should be, their occupational limitations should be worked around. Then transportation of raw material and finished product, and the handling of the material, specifically if it is a kind of fragile material or I could say hazardous material, would be taken into consideration. Control room should be much equipped to understand and take this into consideration. So all the sewage effluents that go through, the industrial effluents that go through the water would all be understood under the water quality. Now once we have an EIA with us, we have a complete assessment. What are the benefits? When I have a region or a plan that is being assessed, I can say following regulations should work around this, so as to monitor the deterioration in the quality of air or water in the region. So there could be environmental benefits, there could be economic benefits, because in long run it would decrease the economic burden on the environment. Then it would decrease the cost and the time of the implementation of project. It would also, there would be cleanup cost for the kind of laid out projects. So the projects which are no more into existence, so there would be a kind of cleanup cost that would be incurred onto the system. So all those are some of the major benefits. Now how does an EIA work? We start with submitting an application with proper documentation. Then those are scrutinized and as per the EIA notification that is released. Now those scrutiny would lead to a kind of no objection certificate, an NOC that is being passed. Now this NOC is submitted to the SPCB, that is the State Pollution Control Board. Now once the State Pollution Control Board arranges a hearing, it would ask for any additional documents that it require, and then finally it would review the Environmental Appraisal Committee. It would either accept it or reject it, and if there are some changes, it would suggest the changes. Once it has suggested the changes, there would be the incorporation of changes, and again an EIA would be conducted and the same process would repeat. Now this is when we talk about a kind of simple hierarchy of EIA. So it usually takes around 30 days in this process. However, in case of mining and river valley projects, there is a kind of two-stage clearance that is required, and it is also known as the site clearance, specifically for the ecological sensitive areas, let's say the wetland areas, the mangrove areas, and so on. And for that the timeline has been extended to 90 days. So this procedure which usually completes in 30 days has been extended to 90 days as per the regions where there is a two-stage clearance required. Now when we kind of follow up the environmental impact assessment, we can follow up it in two basic patterns. First is the precautionary principle and next is the polluters pay principle. Polluters pay principle, as the name suggests, is a kind of very direct principle where one who is polluting would be liable to pay, and this has got a kind of huge regional support, especially from the European community and the OECD. Now what is the precautionary principle? Precautionary principle is a kind of preventive principle which says that the person who is liable or who is creating the pollution, for example, or who is harming the public area or the environment, is liable for the proof of the burden. So the proof of the burden falls on the person who is causing the public harm, in simple terms, if it cannot be explained in scientific consensus. That means if you are able to explain that this is not a part of the public harm, then it's fine. If you are not able to explain that under the scientific consensus, that means you have to explain it, or you have to prove it, or you have to defend yourselves. So you have either the precautionary or the preventive principle and the polluter pay principle, which apply as a kind of follow-up to an EIA. Now what is a strategic EIA? We have talked about the environmental assessment. Now recently there has been some changes, and there has been a kind of wider term that is being used, that is strategic environmental impact assessment. Now this strategic environmental impact assessment is much more formalized, much more systematic and much more comprehensive. It covers nearly a kind of all sectors which it surrounds with, and it tries to address the decision at par with the social and the economic considerations that take into place. And there are some major differences which a strategic EIA and a normal EIA or a EIA has. First of all, under impact assessment, the EIA, we talk about what happens at the end of the decision making. However, under strategic EIA, we talk about the final results at a much prior stage, prior to the final decision is taken place. So it is much more proactive. It is a kind of reactive. So once you have the final decision that comes up, you have the guidelines with you. It identifies the impacts on the environment, but it also identifies the sustainable development impacts. So it just identifies the impact and it talks about the sustainable development policies. It has a kind of more potential alternatives as compared to the EIA. It warns at a much early level as compared to the EIA. There is more emphasis on environmental objectives and natural systems as compared to EIA, where the main focus is on minimizing the impacts or mitigating or removing the impacts. Lower level of details are analyzed under strategic EIA as compared to EIA. Then it is a kind of multi-stage process which requires too much of processing, and it's kind of continuous and iterative. That means it follows one from another. Such does not happen in EIA. It really starts with the beginning and ends towards the final report that is being submitted. So in summary, I can say strategic EIA focuses more on a kind of formalized and systematic concept which is more comprehensive, applied to the whole system as well, and more of all it is kind of sustainable in nature as compared to EIA, which works on standard agendas and standard objectives. So with this we cover the basics of environmental impact assessment. Now most of the time students ask about what kind of questions could be asked under EIA. So under EIA, as I believe, precautionary principles, polluters pay principles are important. Then you have the notification guidelines, specifically in terms of India. So you have the first notification where it became mandatory in 1986 for the EIA to be conducted under 29 categories with a minimum investment of 50 crores or more. So that is an important fact where you have a kind of factual questions, so those are built. Then the timeline, which is nearly 30 days for the EIA process to complete, and in case of two-stage clearance it is 90 days. So these are some of the kind of factual information that could be asked in objective examinations. With this we cover the topic on EIA. We will be covering more topics related to environment in the further sessions. Have a good day ahead.